Yep.
Yeah.
I'm in Pennsylvania and he is in the Carolinas, actually.
Yep.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
in South Carolina.
South
Okay.
Carolina.
So you're actually a little closer then, maybe. I think. Uh, George is up in the
Where are you
Colton area.
from? Oh, you're in
I'm in
Georgia?
Northwest Arkansas right now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think you're. I want to say like almost in between,
Um, yeah,
but
pretty
I think
much.
a little bit closer to me. But yeah, almost in between now. Oh, so we are live everywhere. So
Okay, we are
whenever you are
live
ready,
everywhere. Okay. Yes, sir.
whenever you're ready, George.
Okay.
I think I
Hello
need
and
to.
welcome to uh hello boys and girls and children of all ages. Boys and girls and children of all ages. This is Model Citizen on GCPR, Ghost Claw Productions Radio. I am your host, George Dayer. I am flanked by my wonderful host, the angriest of IT nerds, Gilbert. James will not be with us today, nor Gretchen. They have other family things to do. Um, um, the You are listening to Model Citizen on GCPR.live, and also we are streaming on our
Yeah.
YouTube channel exclusively on our GCPR YouTube channel. If you want to check us out there, I think we're also on Twitch as well. We might also
Yep.
be on TikTok as well. So um, we are not going to be cursing today, so we'll hopefully not get banned by TikTok. So um,
Not yet,
No,
anyway.
we're
the
not
business
on.
end of the program is we have two sponsors. We have AAA Hobbies in Magnolia, New Jersey. Um, if you cannot make it to their Magnolia, New Jersey store, you can go to megahobby.com. That is their online store, and you can pick up models there. If you need to light your models, you can also check out Tenna Controls, tennacontrols.com. Ralph Tenaglia is the owner and operator of Tenna Controls. We've had him on this show before, and Tenna Controls bringing models to light. Our special guest today is a friend of mine who I met during the pandemic, I believe, John McCallum. John is a premier special effects makeup, um, um, sound, I guess, sound editor. And John has worked on many of the movies I like, which um, I believe your first movie was Scalps. You also worked on Surf Nazis Must Die, Phantasm 2, Don Coscarelli, who directed, and I forget. And Biohazard, I believe. So,
That's right.
yeah,
Angelique Petty John. Yeah.
Angelique Pettyjohn, who's actually in the original Star Trek episode, The Gamesters of Triskelion. So, um, I always ask this, of all my guests, who is John McCallum and how did you get here?
Yeah, I guess I always just loved movies, and growing up, my parents let me stay up late and watch The Fly at like 5 years old, and the next day I took a bunch of cardboard and cut it up and made a clawed hand, and then I took a marker pen, painted it black, and then cut off a bunch of my hair to stick on it. And my mom was pretty mad, but I think that was about the start of it there. And it was the hair thing that got her. But anyway, and from then on, I just loved movies. Was fascinated by effects. I always tried to find things that just picked up a magazine in school off the shelf and learned about airbrushing, which in Colwyn Bay, North Wales, no one really did much of there at that time, and things like that. So I sent to London, bought an airbrush. I remember sending to London to buy a makeup book on how to do prosthetics, and cast my friend's head in school, and the two pieces stuck together. I had to sort of chisel them away with him lying on the steps. to get the pieces apart. But fortunately, it worked okay, and I got a pretty decent head mold of him. So, and
Uh,
I've just experimented really, and love models too. You know, you find copies of Cinefex and things back there. Cinefex. Wait, Cinemagic, the ones where you do it yourself
right.
magazine, which you could occasionally find in a shop or send away to London and get it. So,
I met you. I think I met you on Facebook during the pandemic, I
is
believe.
that what it was? Oh, gee,
You
it's like you lose a year there. It's weird, you know. It's almost like 1 year just vanished.
I think
Probably
Sometimes it
I
feels
think I've
like
known
that.
you for like 3 years. I'm not sure.
more
I
than that now, I think, probably, because we were chatting to
more than
Tom
that, yeah.
and this
'Cause I
guy.
remember you were was it you were 3D printing um the mask band stays for I think for nurses and for doctors during the pandemic. You were 3D printing them.
Yeah, that's right. The plastic pieces, which yeah, out of PETG, so they were quite flexible and stringy. PETG being one of the more flexible or durable types of stuff. But back then, I didn't have very good head on the printer. I replaced the head with a direct drive one, so they got real stringy. So you had to sit there for hours cutting off the little strings on them. But yeah, I did a few hundred of them and sent them
Wow.
off. You know, and on an end of three. So you could get about, I don't know, was it 6 on the bed at one time or something, I think. And,
So I
um,
remember you well the way I met you was I commented on I believe the Invader's disintegrator gun. I said, "Oh, I remember doing one of those at Steve Neal's. I was doing that." And then
right
yep,
here,
there
there
you
it is.
go.
Yeah, I
You got
remember.
yours. And let's see. Wait a minute, let me turn off my
So this one I designed out of seeing Fari Ackerman's one, and he had one of the original wooden
I got
ones.
mine.
Yeah, there it is. That's right. I forgot it sent you
Oh
one.
man.
That's the one you sent me.
And I
It's
designed
awesome.
it so you could sort of take it apart, you know, and put a light in it or something, which I still haven't done. But you can pull off the handle, and then you pull the nozzle
Mhm.
out, the trigger that comes out, and then you kind of lift this out, I believe, if I can get it. Um, this comes out next. Yeah, see, I've
Hmm.
even forgotten. So this is kind of hollow. You could put a LED or something in there and some batteries if you wanted. And then the final piece that comes out is just the inside piece. And there's a spring that I think just fell on the floor, but that's the only metal part. Oh, there it goes. And it just has one of these springs in there to
Ah, cool.
that
Oh,
yeah
that is
sort
pretty
of
cool.
sits on this here, and that way it can. And then the actual ones did that. They did have a. If you look carefully on the show, sometimes you can see the
Mhm.
nozzle being retracted, and when they pull the trigger. And so I didn't notice that until after looking at the one Forrest Ackerman had in his place, and it was very surprising at the time to me because it was just painted silver and it was pretty rough wood. They didn't refine it. It wasn't as nicely made maybe as the phases were on Star Trek and stuff like that, which they were quite, those were finished off a lot more, I think. And so this was pretty much rough wood. It chipped a lot, and
Oh, yeah.
it was surprising to me at the time because I thought, wow, you can just spray something silver and it'll look great on a film, and it looked great in the show. It was I also learned that by going to a Doctor Who exhibit in Blackpool, and there was a Space 99 one at the same time, and they showed you things in the Doctor Who exhibit, but they just had photographs that were stuck on them of knobs, So if it was in the background, you wouldn't really notice it was just a photograph. And then I went over to the Space 99 one at the time and was pretty impressed with that. But still, things didn't look as good as they did in the shows. It was one of the
But
first times I realized, lighting and
Mhm.
that the coloring the episodes made a big difference and stuff.
so you, you grew up with it. You, you grew up in Africa? In Africa,
Yeah,
right?
I was born in Nigeria and grew up in mostly in Zambia, which at the
Zambia.
time I only had black and white television, and so everything at that point I pretty much saw, growing up was black and white. I didn't know these things were in color unless you. I was trying to think out why I remember watching because I made a wooden spindrift from Land of the Giants, and I remember watching, thinking, how did I end up painting it red? I didn't know it was red; it was in black and white. And I must have had one of those early annuals, the yearly comic book annuals where it had it in red on the cover. I think they came out about 1971, so I'd have been about 9 or 10 when I made that model. And then when I went to school in England, I was like, oh my God, they're wearing red shirts and the invaders glowing red when they died, and none of that stuff at the time, you knew really until years later.
We had I think we had black and white TV till about oh um until about the 80s, I remember, until about like maybe 79. When we got our first color set, and I was like, "Oh, this is in color." I was like, because I was always watching Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea in black and white.
Hmm.
And then, I mean, I didn't know that the second and third seasons were in color, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, they're in color. Because I was talking to my friend Gus, who got a color TV set when we were when we were in grammar school, and watching Star Blazers, and he goes, "Hey, did you know that the gamma lines are blue?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's just like a different shade of gray for me."
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I lived in a small town in Zambia called Ndola, and I think the entire country then was all black and white television. It was actually broadcast in black and white. There was no color.
Oh.
So you couldn't even go over to somebody's house when they got a color TV and see that. And there was just one channel, and it started at 5 or 6 in the evening, and went to about 12 at night or something. And I remember I had to get in there about 5 to 6 and turn it on. Otherwise, I was kind of in trouble with my dad because the news came on at 6. But it took about 5 minutes for the little outer limits dot to appear on the screen, and sometimes I was late going in there and turning it on. And so he was coming in, and it would be about that big, and you could kind of, he's like, oh, I guess I'll be missing the headlines tonight. And it would take about 5 minutes to come on. And but yeah, I mean, it was fun. All those shows to me at the time were, how did they do that? I remember the Invaders again, just the little crystal. How did they do that? How did they make that spin? It's obviously not got a motor in it because it's transparent. And
Mhm.
then years later, buying, it was on a VHS tape actually. When I bought it, you could barely see the little line around it, just which basically had somebody off camera just doing this, and spinning it in the guy's hand. But back then, with the resolution, you couldn't see that stuff. You couldn't
Yeah.
see, the marks on the floor in Star Trek, where it was, if you look at the HD, versions of them now, you can totally see like, marks on the floor where they're supposed to stand or walk to,
Oh
and
yeah.
stuntmen are more apparent in those
There's
shows.
there's an episode called Journey to Babel, with the ambassadors when they're all, I guess when they're all in like the conference room. And if you look down at the floor in certain scenes, you can see that there's tape on the floor for them
Yeah,
to
yeah, that's
stand.
what.
That's where the camera shot is.
That was
Um,
interesting lately because I pulled out some of the original DVDs I have with the original effects, because now you don't really see those anymore. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, they did quite a change up on it, when they added the digital effects, which now I guess in the 2000s, early 2000s, they did that, I think, somewhere.
the HD, yeah, when they went to HD and they did the HD thing,
Mhm.
they redid, the effects and stuff.
It's quite
Um,
strange
yeah,
if you go back and see the original ones again.
yeah, yeah. So how did you get into special effects? I mean, what was your first, I guess, exposure to it?
Uh,
Because I know that you worked in, I mean, I know you worked in California for a while.
yeah, the uh, I think my problem is I was always interested in a lot of things, and I went to film college in L.A., a place called Columbia Film College that was on La Brea, and the makeup teacher at the time was Harry Thomas, who is kind of portrayed in Ed Wood. Actually, it just says Harry the Makeup Man, but he did a lot of Ed Wood's films and things like that. Had hilarious stories. He'd come over and have dinner sometimes, and have me on the floor laughing at stuff, telling me the stories, and they. So he was really interesting. He came over and you know helped me do prosthetics early on, but I just trial and error. I bought a foam kit and I would make things out of foam latex, and constantly doing stuff out of my apartment, and all sorts of crazy stuff. I remember experimenting. There was a little Indian guy in college, and he wanted a ring, like a big ornate ring with a red jewel on it to disappear and kind of explode. And so I remember this is just not good. But I don't have a double boiler, so I take 2 pans with boiler water in it, and I mix this gunpowder into wax, and mold this ring, and put a little solar igniter into it, so it's all in one piece. And then we had a little hole through this board that we put it on, and lit it from under. I sent the charge through it from underneath, and the thing went, into a bunch of goo. And he was so happy. He was like, "Oh, that was fantastic," But I remember when I was carefully putting the gunpowder in the mix, the phone rang, and I turned to answer the phone, and the whole thing went, on
Oh.
the ceiling, and there was just like dots of wax, black wax everywhere. And I thought, I got to stop this stuff. I don't want to be an explosives guy. And I bought this book by Bernard Wilkie from the BBC, and it showed you how to mix up and make squibs, explosives and everything like that. And I found it fascinating. I would go out on my balcony on my apartment, and I'd have a rubber piece on, and I'd test a squib with a solar igniter, and take cartridge pens from fountain pens, cut them open, and take the ink out, and make a squib, and put a little blood sack on it with corn syrup, and test it out, and the whole thing would go, and I'd turn around, and my neighbor would be walking past, this old lady, and she's like just looking at me, I'd just shake her head and walk on again. And so I ended up doing some props and things like that. It was interesting. Then the Fred Ray movie came along, Scalps, which was on weekends out in Vasquez Rocks,
Oh yeah, Vasquez Rocks. Yeah.
and he goes, you got to make the demon for it, And I said, great, And so this guy came over, Richard Hench, and I molded him, did a full head cast of him. Had a friend from college come and help me, and an alginate at this point, not plaster like it was back
Oh
in
yeah,
high
the
school.
alginate. Yeah.
So I cast his head. The first part of it was some air bladders, which at the time were a big deal and really exciting after The Howling had come out, and Altered States and stuff like that. So we went out and shot the first stage of film, in these air bladders, and we're sitting in Denny's. He's wearing sunglasses. It's early in the morning. He came over about 4 o'clock, and I was making him up. And I start squeezing the air bladders as the waitress comes up to give us, breakfast. And so his whole face is done to do this, and he just kind of looked at him and goes, "You guys are making a movie, huh?" Just shook her head and walked off. And then there was the second stage, which was just a mask. We couldn't afford contact lenses, and at that point, I just used his real eyes, and it just didn't look very good. And so, with the third stage, when he's the final demon, I actually learned how to cast eyes made a little mold, and would paint in, everything, and then put a clear little piece over it, and then put a bunch of I think I used like epoxy over it, which was kind of nice because it yellowed it a little bit too.
Oh
And
yeah.
these came out great. You know, on the third one, although they're static, you know, I thought they were way more effective just having at least static eyes as opposed to, you know, real eyes. You know, I got that I think from the Funhouse, the movie that had come out, the
Oh
Topu
yeah.
that
Funhouse.
Rick Baker did, and they didn't have money for contacts at the time. They were really expensive, not anymore, but yeah, they were super expensive. And so Rick Baker did that. He did this thing with just using, you know, static eyes, and they film it pretty well. It's such a great sculpture to begin with, and it works pretty effectively. You know, you don't see it a lot. You know,
We did, kind of like a jump cut, I guess, jumping from the person with the makeup on to
the
I
screaming.
guess like a bust or whatever that has been made up with the okay.
Yeah, in Fred Ray's The Tomb, I didn't do much for that film, but I did a scarab beetle, which was about this
Oh,
big,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
that
scarab.
moved with the legs, you know, and I painted it with iridescent coloring, and it was cast in mostly in dental, you know, acrylic, and it came out pretty good at the time. You know, you don't get the little motors like you do now. These really tiny little motors, and so there was a place that just had wind up stuff on Melrose Boulevard in LA, all this wind up stuff, and I found some wind up like they were like little ladybirds or something. And I still have one somewhere with the motor, and so I took the motor out of that and kind of rigged that to put my scarab beetle over it, and you could wind it up. It worked for about 40 seconds. And Fredel and Ray loved it, you know. And I'm like, Fred, don't have it on screen too long because it's going to look fake. You know, you're kind of going to see the movement continuing in
Right.
it. And he has it a little bit too long on the screen, and it was optical over with a glowing effect as well, and it eats into somebody's stomach, which was an actual dummy one that was pulled through with a wire through the prosthetic, and kind of ends up controlling somebody, I think. But it was interesting, you know, the contrast now of making models with 3D printing is so much different, I think, you know, because you were kind of like, you know, unless you used styrene plastic, and you know, which I would do a lot of, you know, you could kind of do pretty much anything with that, you know. And so, but a lot of the time it was like for this movie Future Shock, I had to make this hypno lamp, which basically makes people
Oh,
go
yeah.
into nightmares and they don't know they're actually dreaming. And so I go to this place, I forget what it was called, out in the valley in LA, that was just loaded with junk. And a lot of it was military, old military gear. And
Huh?
they even had part of a missile in there that was just, you know, just this empty shell. And I remember getting something like a camera lens. I think it was part of a camera lens. Um, and shoot, it's right here somewhere. It's broken these days, but and using that and cutting a hole in it and rigging it with a little control panel to come out and light up. And back then, it was relatively new in the day in the 80s was the buffering metallic paint, you know,
Right.
that you could get, and then you buffered it afterwards. And I used that for the little control panel, and it looked pretty good, you know. It was quite shiny, you know, at the time. And
Was it the testers,
yeah, I think
the model
that's
masters or something like that?
yeah.
It was
And I
like
remember that.
like a buffing metalizer, I believe.
Yeah, and then you buffered it, and then you went over it with like a clear acrylic, right?
Right.
That you put on. And I'll say something for a second. I'll actually get it because it's right here.
Okay. Just gonna get this.
So this is all that's left of it, and it had a
Oh, cool.
time. This was
Oh yeah, I remember that.
this was and then of course you bought these acrylic domes in any sizes from Kitcraft out in LA at the time, you know, and they had them. You used the smaller ones for eyeballs, and basically had this kind of glowing material, this kind of iridescent stuff
Oh yeah.
that was on a motor in there with a fluorescent bulb or ultraviolet bulb below it, and so it spun. and kind of made this kind of a fluorescent effect. And
Cool.
so this piece is broken off. This got damaged, and then this, of course, has faded over the years. But that was the little control panel that closed up, and it was I found part of a lamp base that you could put on it, and then it had this motor in that could open and close this thing.
Oh, cool.
Part of it, so that's still in there, and then there's a switch that I drilled and put into the lamp bed, and you could press the switch and it would open and close. And that was the paint. This was just acrylic, styrene, plastic, and some of the LEDs have fallen through and inside, and of course this stuff was real shiny back in the day. It was quite nice. This I just took to a guy, and he polished this. And this was probably because of Phantasm. I wanted to do something really nice and shiny. And the camera people hated me for it. And the first thing they did was spray a whole bunch of dust off spray on it to And I said, well, why don't you get like a big black sheet, and put it over the camera with a hole in it? And they're like, oh, no, we don't have the budget for that, which is what we did on Phantasm. But
yeah.
And so this was really dull in the movie. But yeah, so that's, it's pretty heavy. I don't know what this was. Maybe part of a camera or a stand, or who knows.
Oh yeah, it could be like a lens, maybe, or like a lens shade. A lens shade.
I thought a lens, yeah. I'm not really sure, but maybe one day I'll take a little time and restore it or something. But it was fun getting, working on these movies, and sometimes just getting a single job to do one thing, and just not really do much of anything else, which in the case was that. And it's just a lot of fun. Of course, everything with modeling in the business is so different for films than it is because you never have enough time to do anything. I admire all of the beautiful stuff you guys do, and taking time to do something that is just perfect. But you were rushing up all night long trying to spray something and get it ready. And
I usually find that when I'm under the gun for something, my creativity comes out. Like if I have, if I have to deliver something, say, if I have like a modeling show and I have to go to a model show, my creativity peaks at like the last 6 hours before the show. I'll just, I got because I know I'm under the gun.
Mm-hmm.
If I if you give me 3 years to build something, or you give me a year or 6 months to build something, I won't build it until the final, the final week. When I'm trying to scramble around, because that's basically when my creativity, peaks. And that's just the way I am. I
would say definitely part of it. Yeah. I remember working on scalps and experiencing stuff for the first time where, it was a difference between the practicality, like everything you would do at school, you would try and storyboard it out, and stuff like that. But Here was a movie where the actual cash flow was like $13,000 for the whole film. Shot on 16 millimeter, deferred pay on weekends, and camping out at Vasquez Rocks, which was a blast. And I remember doing some production paintings of how the demon was going to look, or the Indian spirit that's conjured up. And Fred going to me goes, "Oh, we don't bother with that. Just sculpt it. We don't have time for anything like that." And so I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and sculpt it.
It's not like Star Wars where you have, like a storyboard for different effects. You just go in there and just do it. Yeah.
Yeah. On Phantasm, it was like that. I would try and kind of draw out something for what I was doing. And Don Cascarelli would go, "Oh, I like that one, do that one." Then I'd go, "Great, now I have to go and find the pieces to make that." But we had a big big box of just bits and pieces. There was something with the door I remember just doing in an hour or something very quickly.
Oh, the door. Yeah, the one was it the one from Phantasm 2 where you take
Mhm.
the
It was
where you
like a
take like the
circle one.
Sentinel ball and you
Yeah.
actually put it into the door. It's got the two slits in it. Yeah.
So we just had these domes, on that, and they were sprayed silver for the balls, which Steve Patino did, and rigged them with all sorts of little interesting stuff. But I quickly just kind of barely recall taking one of these, the larger size for what the ball was, just flipping it around, cutting out the two holes so the ball could be put in there and it would open the door, and then finding something in the box that fit around it. It was like something out of a fan or something. It had these like
Yeah,
something
it kind of looked like an ornate type of
motor. It was a piece of
escutcheon or
motor.
something like that. Yeah, that you
And
put
putting that around it quickly, and they needed this thing like in an hour. They realized they completely had forgotten about it, and just quickly spraying it silver, and we didn't even have time to send it off to be vacuum silverized, which is what the spheres were done with on that. And I know we've mentioned this before, actually, but the spheres on that were using, you were taking a lot of these plastic domes and sending them off to this place, and they would put them in this vacuum machine. And basically, I believe some kind of powder is sucked onto them.
yeah,
And that's how they make, metallic chrome pieces for toys, plastic parts.
yeah.
And
It's a yeah. I've done it, I've done it with with the other molds where you actually dust because I was doing the Zat guns from Stargate, and I actually have my mold downstairs. I have like the Zat gun mold that I took off of the model, and I made like a full mold of it. But what I did was I dusted it with kind of like a copper and a brass, like a copper and like a brass powder. So what you would do is you dust both, sides of the mold because it is a two-piece mold. It's a two-part mold. It has a pour point.
oh,
So when
yeah.
you put so when you actually pour in the resin, the heat from the resin turns the
Oh,
powder basically into almost like a paint, and it forms like a skin over it.
mhm.
And then when you pull it out, you're like, oh, this is really cool. But if you should chip it, like if it falls or it chips or whatever, then you have a problem because you're gonna have to rematch it, with the thing. That's why I always like to go for resin that's called it's called color fast resin. Color
Mhm.
fast resin, you could put you can actually pigment the resin. So if you pigmented it in brass or in copper and it chipped off, it looks like copper. It's still copper.
Mhm.
It's not like it's white or black or whatever. So
I did do a bit of that. Yeah, I did something in black where I put universal colorant or something into the mix for the glaze coat, and you would it came up pretty nice. I never knew about the metallic thing where it would actually make the dust even more metallic by the heat process.
uh,
Interesting.
yeah, you could actually there's something I've seen called lab metal. It's a it looks like a filler, but it's made out of aluminum dust. So basically, what you can do is you could use it like filler on aluminum. Like if you have like little nicks in actual aluminum plate, you could fill in this stuff, and then it looks like auto body filler. Basically,
Hmm.
it has aluminum dust in it. So you would actually screed it into the actual nick or the gouge or whatever. You let it dry, like you let it set up, and then you'd actually use like steel wool, and you can actually make it, like shiny. Actually rub it, and um, it's almost like a rub and buff, like a rub
Hmm.
and buff type thing. So,
Well, I mean, you sent me some of those pens now that are pure chrome or something,
oh, the
and that
Molotov,
stuff's
yeah,
amazing.
Molotov.
Yeah, I'm I've also been messing with the Alclad paints, you know, and I think I may have actually even ordered from that place you're talking about because I had a bunch of Alclad stuff come, and I think they sell those, right?
Yeah.
And that stuff is amazing too. And in fact, you know, I was doing that Day the Earth Stood Still model for a friend, and you know, I had to sort of, you know, use a less chrome one for that because in the film it's not that, you know, shiny. It's sort of a very muted kind of aluminum like look or something. And
Right.
you know, there was one called white aluminum, I think, or that I used, and that pretty much looks like the one in the film to me. You know, hard to say, but um, you know, it's kind of a, and that's another thing that amazes me. I was talking about that before, that you know, when I was a kid and I was making models, you had silver paint and you had gold paint. That was about it. I don't
Yeah.
remember there was even a bronze back then. Everything I painted back then, it was just one of the two colors, you know. And I was thinking that when I was going on ordering, you know, these paints for models and things, it's like, my goodness, um, you know, they've got about every color you can imagine, you know, and it's just amazing, you know, from iridescent things to there's almost that sort of Alclad holographic stuff that they have now that I just bought some of it to mess with.
Yeah.
And
It's an iridescent paint. It has it has I forget what it has in it, but um the because we were talking to Mark Myers on the show. He was on the show. Mark Myers does a lot of Star Trek
yeah,
models, and he did the Constitution refit, you know, like from Star Trek the Motion Picture. So he was doing that as a model, and he was actually getting the scales right because the the I believe the iridescent paint that he was using for the saucer section brings it to scale. It looks like there's individual plates
yeah,
that are on, you know, the ship, and you know, it makes it really look, you know, like it makes it look, you know, like really really cool. But it goes from like blue to red. It'll do blue and then, you know, like a lighter blue, or like almost a white, and then, you know, red.
yeah.
You know, it goes into amber and then it goes into red. So it depends on which way you look at it. But yeah,
I always noticed that at the time too with the shows, especially Star Trek: The Motion Picture, how interesting it was. Uh, this was a problem with me, you know, doing an Invader saucer, or even in that one in CGI. Is that you've got these smooth surfaces and you're trying to make them look somewhat detailed, but you can't really add detail to them, you know, like the original Enterprise was. And there was a great way of coming up with a way to do that with these sort of almost iridescent paneling effects,
right.
you know, that they now also in CG have completely got down now as well. So, you know, it's like, I think the newest Star Trek films, I was like, my God, that looks beautiful, even though it's not even a model anymore. They've completely got it. You know, I know that Ron Thornton back when he was doing Babylon 5 would experiment with trying to get, you know, different effects like that with the models. You know, and even though that CG now, you know, looks quite obviously CG, it was very impressive at the time. You know, it was impressive for a TV show to do to do that. I think back at that
Oh
time.
yeah, to do yeah,
The
yeah.
other thing is, you
Yeah.
know, you're always at this problem with films. If I can find the other one, you've always got this issue with the coloring, you know, that's added to TV shows and films. And you know, here's this Invaders gun because this is kind of like how it looks in the show. It's almost like blue because you know they were obviously with the way the film is and the lights and the tint,
Right,
you know, as opposed to this, which is what it really looked like in real life, you know.
right.
And you know, constantly in modeling groups, everybody's arguing over colors of what original color was something, you know. But you know, if you wanted something to look more like it was in the show, it's probably this. It kind of, especially indoors, it kind of looked.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's almost like an yeah, it's almost like an iridescent blue.
yeah.
Um, a lot of people who do the Invader saucer, when like they paint it, they always paint it silver. They painted like a light blue. I'm like,
Hmm.
it's not light blue. The original model was white.
Yeah.
It was filmed against the blue screen. The
Mhm.
blue screen reflected off the white, and that's why you see it as blue in the series. You know, they would show different pieces of the saucer as silver, like the landing legs or the underside when, like when, like uh when Roy Thinnis, when he gets into the saucer, everything's silver. Of course it has to be silver because if you spray something silver, it's futuristic, it's from another planet.
Yeah.
Like Lost in Space series. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they lit it green in the one episode, so it had all that nice sort of green color to it in the Innocence one.
Right.
Yeah, that comes up on those blogs too. People are going, yeah, why don't you paint it like it really was or something? But of course, the model kit was gray. Like the Aurora model kit was a gray, almost silver-like color, and I think
Yeah.
everybody just assumes it's that, anyways. But I believe that the color, because I talked to Mel Keys, texted back and forth with him about doing the Starship Enterprise and um, and the Invaders one. As far as the Invaders one, it was just him pretty much on a weekend with somebody else helping him. But the other two guys were away. But I believe they used the same color, which was a white with a very slight green to it. And the
Yeah.
green fought off the blue a little bit, so that when you put it up against the blue screen, you had a better key.
Yeah.
Which was difficult at that time. You can even see in the second season of the Invaders that they fixed the key in the first season. Over the title sequence, you already see part of the saucer shimmering in and out. And just
Oh, yeah.
key and
Yeah. I noticed that on the on the original Enterprise. Excuse me. On the original Enterprise model,
mm-hmm,
the Constitution class that's in the Smithsonian. If you look at it, it's green. It looks like it's green.
mm-hmm,
Like different shades of green. When people look at it on screen, it looks like it's gray.
yeah, yeah.
But depending on your TV, it could have been gray, it could have been green, it could have been, but the green would have broken up. I
When
guess
you look
the
at
blue, like the blue screen, because the blue screen, if you paint something in gray and then you put the blue screen on it, you're going to lose a lot of stuff.
yeah,
You lose a
I
lot.
mean, now the digital tools to fix that stuff are way more impressive. But back, I know when the Thief from Baghdad came out, the original '40s one, with Conrad Voight in it, that one was the first time they used color blue screen. They've been using it in black and white, and they had no problems in black and white. But you look at the Thief from Baghdad now, there's a lot of blue shimmer around everything, and they were saying they couldn't really fix it at the time. And over the years, they got better at lighting and doing that. But I think that very slight green white it helped, key it away from the background a little bit. And of course now everything's pretty much gone with digital. Like, the primary color is green. So if you were doing something probably for a digital movie now, you'd want to do the opposite and have it slightly, blue tinted perhaps, or red tinted, or something that's a little away from the opposite color.
Yeah, when they were doing, I think when they did Alien, the Nostromo was, I think it was tinted in like yellow, almost
Hmm.
like a chromatic yellow. But when you see it on screen, it looks like it's white. You
Yeah,
know,
that's interesting. Yeah, it's
but they
beautiful.
but
Yeah.
they couldn't get the thing with the white is like if you have white paint, like the Narcissus, which is the escape shuttle that Ripley takes and ultimately destroys the alien. That shuttle looks like it's white. It's actually yellow.
Hmm.
But when they try to get like a depth of field or like a lighting, with it, when they try to get like a light reading off it with a depth of field, they couldn't get a depth of field because it was all white. It couldn't discern. So they basically said they had to spray it yellow. So they sprayed it yellow. I
Interesting.
mean, they did that with the shuttle from Outland,
Mm-hmm.
the Sean Connery movie. They couldn't get a depth of field off the thing because they had paint. I think they painted it like, yeah, They painted it white. In the movie, it looks like it's gray,
Hmm.
but that's just because of the lenses and the lighting and the shading that they did.
I,
So,
I know those guys doing Space 1999, used to complain in the summer how hot it got in there with the amount of light they had to throw on those models to keep the depth of field.
yeah.
And in the winter, it actually was okay, it was kept it kind of warm in there. But I mean, they only came up with 400 film. The first movie I believe that shot with that was Blue Thunder, where you could actually get the really nice, clear um, night shots of the helicopter
Oh,
flying around, and so they did a lot of night footage for the film, and that was the first time the 400 film came along, which was quite grainy, really. You still had to put some light on it, and but everything but beyond before that, it was like 200 pretty much for everything, and
right.
so to get that depth of field, yeah, I mean it was a huge amount of light that you had to throw on it, and it's funny. It was an old zombie movie from the 70s where they didn't have money, and of course, it's completely out of focus in the front and the back, and then the thing catches fire, and you can see that the model's about this big, and yeah, that was the other thing, Towering Inferno model being something like, what was it, 64 feet high. Just
Oh, yeah. The Bonaventure Hotel. Yeah.
yeah, to get the flames looking realistic, but I have a photo of, you can look it up online too. They're sitting out at Universal making that model, and oh, my God, it's way up there, It's and that was the scale they figured on how you could get a decent fire effect, Of course, now even if you were using a model now, you could make it this big, and just put in flames, or I took a little DC3 diecast that I have, right, and I set it up. I wish I could show the clip. Actually, it's on YouTube, and set it up. It's about 3 inches long. And put it on a little green screen stand. And my friend who smoked cigarettes blew cigarettes on it, and with a deck of the propellers would spin, And so we got some nice smoke going past it from blowing cigarette smoke on it. And I filmed that, and then I just took it into After Effects or something and added a sky background, and and then some other kind of made some cloud effects or something to go over it, right? And sent it to my friend Mahmoud, who's always good at picking the size of something up, and he said it was a full size plane, and I was like, and then I showed him the model, and he was really surprised. So now you really have to have a model that big anymore.
Hmm.
Even if you were adding ocean to it, you could just put in a real ocean background or something.
Yeah.
Have a much smaller size scale to it.
Yeah, but yeah, doing scaled water to like a submarine or a ship or something like that would be. I remember they used to just float alcohol onto the water because the droplets were smaller, I think it was. Because the droplet, like if you had I think it was isn't it there was a movie called Raise the Titanic
Oh
where
yeah.
they had to raise the Titanic, and I think the model was 25 feet long or 35 feet
Yeah,
long. It was very, very large.
it was actually at 60 something feet long.
Oh, it was a 60?
Yeah.
Okay. But they but but the but the water droplets were a problem because when it was coming out of the water, you see all the bubble and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The water droplets were a problem. They wanted to make the water droplets smaller, so I think they floated alcohol. They floated alcohol onto the surface to make like the water droplets smaller.
Yeah, I never
To
thought
make
about that. There's that famous shot of the guy pulling the model.
Oh yeah, pulling the model with the rope. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
So.
and also, I guess I had to go back and look for it, but somebody was talking about the story where there's a little guy on the deck pumping the water when it comes up, and if you look, you'll see it. It's actually there. It's a little joke in there. But yeah, that was an impressive model actually at the time. I think that the larger movies, the Towering Inferno and Raise the Titanic and the James Bond movies, so the Tanker again. It seems like they would sell for around 60 feet. That must have been something to do with the scale size. I have in a book somewhere on cinematography effects. It's got the sizing for your scale of model compared to how much you have to undercrank or overcrank the camera, and
Oh,
if you made a model that was this size, then you were looking at. I think I looked it up as I've been working on Dick Tracy Space Coupe, and it's about
oh,
this big, the one I had, and I was looking it up on the scale in this book to see how much slowing it down, you'd get a nice effect on it, which is, of course, the opposite, and it would be about 160 frames a second for something that was about that big, which, of course,
mhm.
the larger it gets, the less you have to, overcrank the camera in order to get it. But if you look at it like something like You Only Live Twice in the beginning, the models are so nicely smooth, even in space when they come past, and the Russian one
Oh,
all
yeah.
opens up and takes, eats the other one. That you can tell that they did some kind of very nice slow motion, overcranked it, and then, which of course meant you had to have more light even again, because you were taking a less of a shot, time on the shot. The more you slowed the film, if you went the opposite way and sped it up, then you've got you a lot longer. Like just taking a pinhole camera and keeping it there for a long time until the actual asking nobody to move. Which was the big advancement with the motion control, is it could just move, stay still, shoot the shot at any exposure you wanted, move,
Right.
shoot the shot, and so everything would stay sharp and still need less light than it used to have.
We have 5 minutes. Actually, we have 6 more minutes to go. I just want to ask you one, I guess one final, go on. I mean, I want to ask you a million questions, but um, we just don't have the time.
I was thinking,
Um,
oh my God, what are we going to talk about for an hour or something?
um, so you do musical scores. You
Mhm.
score with it score. Do you score? You know, just like um do you score, like big budget movies or low budget movies or just anything that comes into your, I
Yeah, I mean,
guess,
the,
anything that
the
comes into your studio or
I mean, the largest budget movie I ever did was probably a few $1 million or something like that. But I think the crazier low budget ones are sometimes the more fun. I don't know. It's just been the way it is. I happened into it accidentally because I bought a synthesizer when I was in film school to do sound effects for my own little things, and maybe try a bit of music. At the time, John Carpenter and people were just using a piano and a synthesizer to score a whole film. And I thought, I'll mess with music as well. So, and two out of the three, being everybody wants to be a director in college, they're like, "Can you do my movie? Can you do my movie?" And two out of my three friends in college ended up doing feature films, and I ended up scoring those. Hadn't a clue what I was doing, but it was a lot of fun, and it sort of kind of came from that, and yeah, I mean, my bane is probably being interested in far too many things, I guess, but if I probably worked on one thing and did it right, you can get really good at it or something. But
yeah, I remember seeing the original John Carpenter movie, Assault on Precinct 13,
hmm
which is, and it's all done with synthesizers, like the entire soundtrack. And I was like, and that is basically his, I guess, some his shtick, I guess.
yeah.
Like you could say, it's all done with,
Well, the
the
interesting
synthesis.
thing is, along came the sampler where you could do, pretty much take even real sounding instruments and doing them, And for a while, people wanted things to sound like an orchestra, and which is not easy to duplicate on things like that. But we did it anyways, And that I was kind of doing films that way for a while, like Grizzly Mountain was all samplers and stuff like that. But it's interesting with those John Carpenter things because now there's a throwback to that where people want a synthesized score to something to kind of, there's a bunch of sort of retro movement back to that. And I worked with these two young guys a few years ago that know more about 80s horror films than I do. And I scored their film. And they wanted it to be like a old 80s film,
Nice.
And it was all pretty much synthesized type effects and a piano. And that was about it. And they know more about 80s movies than I do. It's funny. They're only in their 20s, So.
But I mean, you grew up in the 80s. I mean, you were doing special effects in the 80s. What do you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, we've chatted a lot, and they always love hearing all the stories. And
I love hearing your stories. It's awesome. Is there any chance we're going to get together and do a book?
Yeah, I should probably, sort of keep writing. Earlier on I mentioned that Angelique story about the convention. I actually wrote it on the guy's post that he put in the Star Trek group, and so you have to go read that. It's quite funny, I think. So I need to write these things down, I guess. And
we have 2 minutes. I just wanted to thank our sponsors for today. AAA Hobbies in Magnolia, New Jersey. And if you cannot get to their Magnolia, New Jersey location, you can get your models at megahobby.com. Also, Ralph Tenaglia from Tenna Controls. Tenna Controls bring models to light. Ralph makes electronic board and lighting kits for your models. So you can go to Mega Hobbies, get a model, go to Ralph, go to tennacontrols.com, get your lighting kit for your model. We are going to have Ralph on the show again. He does have a new lighting kit for the Strange New Worlds Enterprise, which is, I think it's already out, but the lighting kit has just come out, so we're going to have him on. I want to thank our guest today, John McCallum, for coming on and, just sharing with, and sharing a couple of stories with us. We are going to have you on again. I do want to hear about the Angelique, the Angelique Pettyjohn story with Biohazard and you and everything else. So thank you so much for coming on, John.
Yeah, Gilbert went very quiet there. Is he?
He's doing some other stuff with the radio station. So he's actually in a meeting, and he just told me to end it when it ends. So thank you so much, sir. I do appreciate it.
I'll chat to you soon.
All right, take care.
Take care.